Russian tanks in the center of Kyiv, but not in the way that Vladimir Putin had wanted. From killing machines to burnt-out trophies of war, reminders that Ukrainians feel more confident than ever about winning. And yet 1/5 of their country is still under Russian occupation. In this CCTV, said to be from Zaporizhia Oblast, the ballot boxes travel from door to door, accompanied by Russian soldiers and a sharp knock. Not exactly free and fair. Voting also in the iconic Mariupol, first destroyed by Russia, now about to be annexed to it, but with around 3/4 of the original population no longer there. This forceful redrawing of the map hurts them more than most. Displaced citizens of Mariupol gathering today in Kyiv on what should have been their city's birthday. Today's vote just adds insult to injury.
It will be fake.
It's fake.
Nobody will believe somebody in Mariupol will really want to live in Russian Federation, because it's country which destroyed our city.
Mariupol is Ukraine.
Forever. Okay. So the vote today, the referendum, how much does that hurt you?
It hurts me so much because all my family now staying in Mariupol, and my heart and my soul staying in Mariupol still. And it's so unfair that my family have no opportunity to say, to have the choice.
Я вообще очень сложно это все переношу. Мне кажется, что после этого, что они сделали с нами, но я лично не живу. Я существую. И очень сложно найти силы, чтобы заново начать, найти в себе силы жить. И то, что они сейчас делают в Мариуполе, это преступление.
And by the way, Hannah and her son Dennis speak their mother tongue Russian, like so many from Mariupol, and yet they were bombed out of their homes by the Russian army. It is one of the brutal ironies of this war, meant to deny Ukraine's separate identity and quash its existence. And yet it has done the exact opposite, one verse at a time. Well, our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, has been keeping track of these referendums taking place in the 4 regions partially controlled by Russia in the east of Ukraine since the voting began yesterday. And she's now in Kryvyi Rih, from where she joins me. Lindsay, it's good to speak to you. Tell me, how, in your opinion, do these referendums change the calculation of the war on both sides, both the Russian and the Ukrainian side?
Well, from the Ukrainian side, I don't think it changes much at all. As far as they're concerned, these are parts of Ukraine. They will continue to do their best to get them back, to push the Russians out. But for President Putin, this ritual of manufactured consent is important, because after the results come out, 85, 90, 95% allegedly voting in favor of joining Russia, he will annex those territories. Nobody else will accept that result, but the Russians will. And he will say that any attack on those territories, particularly by Western weapons, is an attack directly on the Russian Federation. Now, within those territories, it's important as well. People who've been living in occupied parts of Ukraine have got used to being Russified, as it were. I met a woman the other day who'd just escaped, who showed me all the rubles she'd been given. Useless to me, she said. They've been trying to Russify the school curriculum as well. But now, significantly, they're highly likely to try and mobilize men in those areas to make them fight against their own country, Ukraine.
Okay, what about the military situation on the ground? Because we've been widely reporting on their extraordinary and somewhat unexpected successes in recent weeks here. Have they been building on that here on the Ukrainian side?
Well, from the Russian side, first of all, we can see an acknowledgement of the problems that they've had. because General Bulgakov, who was in charge of logistics, and logistics has been one of the main bugbears for the Russians, has been replaced by Colonel General Minitsev. Now, he was the person, the architect of the attacks on Mariupol. Here in Ukraine, he's called the butcher of Mariupol. On the Ukrainian side, they are now trying to consolidate the gains that they've made. But here in the south, in Kherson, it's much harder. Rains have started. There's a danger that they are going to get literally bogged down in the mud. It would be a mistake to think that this war is over.
To discuss this and the protests that are taking place in Russia itself is lawyer Daria Korolenko from OVD Info, a Russian human rights organization in Latvia which collects information and analyzes data on the protests in Russia. Thanks for coming on the program, Daria. How serious are these protests that we're seeing?
Good evening. Well, the protests are basically the same that we have seen back in late February, March, the same as the anti-war protests. There are now more than 2,000 detained this week, and we see a lot of police brutality. We see a lot of women participating. We see criminal cases and searches opened at the houses of people who organized this protest. So everything as usual in Russia.
And do you think this is a turning point in the way the Russian population has regarded this war?
For now, it's really hard to predict. I mean, it's really good that even after this massive repressive wave, the crackdown that happened since February with all the independent media shut down, with hundreds of criminal cases, that people still go out and protest. It's really inspiring, but I think we will see how it's turned out and whether the protest will continue.
And can you confirm these reports that we've heard, that many of the protesters who've been arrested, as they get arrested and get taken to police stations, they are handed their conscription papers?
Yes, on Thursday, it happened in Moscow in at least 18 police departments. And now we receive such messages from other cities in Russia, for example, from Irkutsk, from St. Petersburg, and we will get the full data on how it turns out today, I think tomorrow. But also a lot of people got 10 days of arrest after they protested, and they were threatened that after they will serve these 10 days, they will be sent straight to the army.
We've been reporting a lot about those young Russian men who don't want to fight, or either trying to flee the country or joining the protests. What evidence is there for Russian men who do want to fight?
Actually, I think the picture is really the opposite. Many people who try to support the war are now doing the opposite. They're trying to flee the country, or they're trying to escape to go to the army. So I don't think there is any people who really want to go to the army. And if they did, they were already there. They went in like February or March to the Ukraine.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed, Daria Korolenko. Let's go back to Fatima.